Hello, welcome to the 2A Infobank, the podcast of the Second Amendment Society of Texas. I'm Will Cawthon, your host for these podcasts, and we're going to kick things off with a look at the latest development in VanDerStok versus Garland, the challenge to the ATF's final rule on unfinished frames and receivers. Andi Turner, Legislative Director of the Second Amendment Society of Texas, and Bill Cawthon, Director of the 2A Infobank, are here to give us an update and some context.
Okay, it's good to be here, and it's great to have Andi with us.
Hi, guys.
Turning to some important developments in court cases, and I guess the first one is the biggie, is VanDerStok v. Garland and Supreme Court's decision to stay the Judge O'Connor's order to vacating the frames and receivers law or frames and receivers regulation, rule, whatever, ATF, mind fart.
So the Fifth Circuit, what you're saying is the Fifth Circuit, God bless them, decided that the ATF was overstepping its boundaries on regulating receivers, and now SCOTUS has stayed that order. I know you've done a whole lot of reading on this. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, while people describe this as a major setback, I'm inclined to disagree. Justice Alito's order should have been expected, but the Supreme Court still denied the Justice Department's request for intervention, just like they've denied every other request for intervention that they've received this year. And they apparently ignored the Justice Department's appeal that it be considered as a request for certiorari. And they're holding off on whether they'll grant certiorari or if they will grant certiorari.
Okay, and let me just stop you right there just for a hot second. For anybody that doesn't know, in order for a case to be heard, you can submit any case you want to SCOTUS. Whether or not they listen to it depends on whether they certify it or not, and it's called a writ of certiorari. And that's that's what you're getting at, is that you think they will or they won't.
The thing is that VanDerStok v. Garland is one of three cases, the others being Mock v. Garland and Cargill v. Garland. And these all deal with the same thing. Whether the Justice Department and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has overstepped its regulatory bounds. We've got a challenge to the bump stock ban that was from Donald Trump, and then frames and receivers, and pistols equipped with braces, and those came in the Biden administration. So what I'm wondering is, they're basic, we've got three cases, and they're all based on one main holding, that the ATF has exceeded its regulatory authority and has bypassed Congress, effectively creating a law which it has no authority to do.
Well, and Bruin helped us with this too. I mean,
Yes.
Going back and way back, on another podcast, we said Bruin will change everything. You just need to give it time. And so in the VanDerStok versus Garland case, I mean, they even took a look, actually in several of the cases, they even took a look at the history of this and commented in their findings on what the historical nature of this is, which is the requirement from SCOTUS via Bruin.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah, it has to be text as seen through history and tradition. And basically, there is no history and tradition for any of the bans, bump stock, frames and receivers, or pistols equipped with braces. And more to that, there is no historical precedent for the executive branch to legislate. And this is what's going on. I mean, we've already seen this in West Virginia versus EPA, another case, Loper-Bright versus Raimondo.
Oh, hold on, you're going to lose people if you don't tell them what the case
Yeah,
is.
well, no, I'll tell them both.
I don't remember what West Virginia versus EPA
Well,
is.
West Virginia versus EPA simply was the EPA made some rules, and the state of West Virginia said, and so they sued. And the Supreme Court said that the EPA had overstepped its bounds. Now, the case that they just granted certiorari to is Loper Wright versus Raimondo, and that'll be coming up at the session that starts in October. And what that is a mandate that herring fishing boats have a federal monitor on board whenever they're out, and that the fishing fleets are required to pay for it. And what this is another overstep of an executive branch agency. I mean, basically anything but Congress, the judiciary, is the executive branch. Every federal agency is executive branch.
So what you're telling me, Bill, is not only is the Biden administration, doing everything they can, and it doesn't matter what the boundaries are, to come after anything remotely resembling a firearm. But now they're picking on blue collar workers. Having grown up on the East Coast, I know a lot of watermen, and all they've done now is said. Did you say it was herring?
Herring fishing.
So they picked one particular kind of fish, and those fishermen now have to spend more money, and I don't know how much it is, but I doubt it's $5. And I got to tell you, the watermen in Maryland and Virginia, these are some hard-working folks, as we all are. But can you imagine being out on the water, given all the weather? In Texas, it's going to be 107 here today. I don't know what it's going to be where you live, but I can only imagine.
The same. I think our heat index is about 115 right now.
And in Maryland, Virginia, those watermen are out there in the snow, freezing rain, and nothing stops them. And now the Biden administration is not just coming for us, the 2A owners, but they're coming after the little guys too. And it just blows my mind. But in terms of blowing my mind, Bill, I wanted to ask you about this U.S. v. Daniels case that just came down, I think, the day before we taped this. And again, it does use the Bruin requirement of historical analysis. But if you just give us give a brief overview of what this was, because when you called me, I was like, wow, just wow.
Well, U.S. v. Daniels deals with the federal prohibition on firearm possession by people who use controlled substances, but it includes marijuana. Now, the problem here is that, marijuana is still classed as a Schedule I drug. It's right up there with heroin. Federally. Okay. But the prohibition on users of controlled substances didn't come about until 1968.
Right, and I'm going to get into that. There's a part in his the Fifth Circuit's opinion on that. And by the way, I get calls every week from people who say, well, and I get them from all over the country. I have a medical marijuana license. I'm allowed to smoke marijuana. If you are smoking marijuana currently on a regular basis, or you are addicted to drugs or alcohol, you may not currently purchase a gun from an FFL, full stop. If you are I think they call it a habitual, it doesn't the 4473 say habitual?
Habitual user of or addicted to.
Right. So I don't know what habitual meaning habit. I don't define that. But anyway, this kind of deals with a little bit of that. And so what they said, and I'm going to read this into the record because I found it very compelling, because no matter where you stand on the marijuana issue, the opinion itself, and maybe I'm just a political nerd, but I enjoyed reading very much. So what they say, throughout American history, laws have regulated the combination of guns and intoxicating substances, but at no point in the 18th or 19th century did the government disarm individuals who used drugs or alcohol at one time from possessing guns at another time. A few states banned carrying a weapon while active actively under the influence, but those statutes did not emerge until well after the Civil War. Section 922G3, the first federal law of its kind, was not even enacted until 1968, nearly 2 centuries after the Second Amendment adopted. And again, this is word for word from the opinion. In short, our history and tradition may support some limits on an intoxicated person's right to carry a weapon, but it does not justify disarming a sober citizen based exclusively on his past usage. And again, however you feel about the legalization of marijuana doesn't even matter, okay? This is an accurate statement, what they've put in here. It's almost, and pardon me to any lawyers who might be listening, it's almost double jeopardy, in my opinion. And I am not a lawyer. You did something then, back then, and the judicial system knows about it, so you were in some way punished, whether it's a fine or you went to jail or prison or community service or probation, whatever. Now you're being punished again, even though you are a current law-abiding citizen. Really? Does that seem fair? I don't think so. Don't get me wrong, the emphasis is on someone with a firearm being sober. I would never, and Bill would never, advocate that someone use any substance before handling a weapon that would alter their physical or mental abilities. In other words, yeah, we did our share of brown water after we went hunting and field dressing, and we're done with that, but never before. It's a deadly weapon. Why would you do that? I don't care if it's a crossbow. Why? And if one of us is going to engage in brown water or whatever, it shouldn't be any other way. It needs to be after. Everybody goes out, all thinking adults. When you go drinking, you make sure that if you're drinking, you are not driving home. You have somebody drive you, you call an Uber, 1,000 ways to get home these days. You spend the night at somebody's house. Same thing with and I don't care. Don't drink a bottle of wine and then go cut up your vegetables for dinner. You can cut your finger off. I mean, it's just True. That way. So, I do think this feels a little double jeopardy-ish. But what do you think? Tell me more.
Well, it's sort of double jeopardy. I mean, government is going to say the purpose of the question. You either incriminate yourself as being somebody who's prohibited, or you lie and you've committed a federal offense punishable by years in prison. So the thing is that what they're doing is trying to dissuade people from trying to buy a gun at all. Now, my only problem with the double jeopardy is that what you talked about, you're talking about being punished first for an offense involving some drugs or marijuana or whatever. And this here is not, you don't even have to have been convicted or even arrested or anything else. You just, oh gosh, yeah, I smoked joints in college.
Which was 30 years ago. I mean, I'm not saying for you, I'm saying for somebody.
Could have been a little bit before that.
Could have been 15 years ago. Could have been whatever, but it wasn't yesterday.
Yeah. Right. But the thing is that every prohibition, every legitimate prohibition that has not been challenged has been based on either a conviction for what the Fifth Amendment calls a capital or otherwise infamous crime,
right?
Or there has been a determination or an adjudication by a court or a board of competent authority that you're mentally incapable of handling your own affairs, or that you were discharged dishonorably from military service, you've renounced your U.S. citizenship, or you're illegally in the United States. These are all things that are, this is for sure, this is set in stone. The question about marijuana, oh, well, no, you don't have to have done anything at all. You just have to admit that you did. And that's self-incrimination more than double jeopardy. But the thing that I don't understand now is why it took so long for this to happen. Back in 1968, when the Gun Control Act of 1968, which included the drug prohibition, went into effect, marijuana possession or usage was a felony pretty much all over the United States. Now you got to remember that in 1961, Congress redefined a felony as any offense for which the maximum sentence was more than a year in jail. So, but since that time, as we all know, things have changed.
Things have changed a lot.
Yeah, 23 states and the District of Columbia have legalized marijuana. 8 more states have decriminalized it. Other states have approved it for medical use. And by the way, just having a medical prescription card is enough to bar you from
You don't even have to use it. Right.
No.
You don't even have to use it. Just qualifying for it, having filled out the form and having the card in your wallet, you could never have been to a dispensary in your life, never smoked a joint in your life.
True.
Done. You're out.
Yeah.
So probably need to wind this up because I know you want to talk about Rocky Mountain.
Yeah. Basically, the federal law now governing possession of marijuana for a small amount of marijuana, it's a misdemeanor. It's no longer a felony. So why it's a misdemeanor and a non-violent misdemeanor?
Right.
So there is no justification for the prohibition to still stay on the books.
Yeah. I mean, it is time for the law to catch up. And again, I am not advocating, this is not me or Bill taking a position on whether there should be legalized marijuana or not. This is about catching up. The laws have changed. Whether we agree or not, the laws have changed. So you know, in terms of 2A, they're very slow to catch up for folks who want to legally, who are law-abiding citizens and want to own, possess, purchase firearms. And holding something that somebody did 10 years ago that's a nonviolent crime where the penalties have either been really diminished or gone away entirely is just wrong. Like, if it's no longer a crime, shut up and go away. Like, you know. So, anyway, on another subject, Bill, did I read correctly that the state of Colorado, the legislature raised the age to buy certain firearms, and then it got taken to court and they lost? Please tell me I'm right.
Oh, you're correct. Colorado Senate Bill 23169 made it a Class 2 misdemeanor to sell or transfer a firearm to a person under 21. This covers not only sales through FFLs, it covers private sales, it covers, giving a gun to somebody under 21. And it was, like I said, a Class 2 misdemeanor. And the penalty was jail up to 120 days and a fine of up to $750. So the day this law was supposed to go into effect, Chief Judge Philip Brimmer of the U.S. District Court for the District of Colorado tossed it and granted a preliminary injunction on saying that Colorado cannot enforce the law. And having read the judge's opinion, it's almost kind of funny because the defendant in this case was Jared Polis, who's the governor of Colorado, and the points that were raised in the defense were absurd. The first was the assertion that they always make is that Americans ages 18 to 20 weren't really part of the people when it came to the Second Amendment.
But they are for all the other parts except being president. With the exception of being president, you can vote, you're tried as an adult,
Yeah, you can enter contracts, do all of that. But
you're not old enough to, you can put yourself in all kinds of financial and criminal jeopardy at 18 and vote, but you can't buy a firearm.
Right. You can carry one. Now, the thing is the law exempted 18, 19, and 20-year-olds who were in the military, who were law enforcement officers, as they always do, which is crazy. The state pointed to laws establishing 21 as the age of majority, despite the fact that when the Militia Act of 1792, which was passed just a year after the ratification of the Bill of Rights, required males 18 or older to be part of the militia, and they were expected to purchase their own weapons.
As they are in many countries.
Yeah. Hollis's legal team said their parents purchased the guns for them. There's not a single shred of evidence anywhere in the historical record that indicates mom and dad bought the militia guys their guns. Because by the time they were 18, most of them were working.
Oh yeah, many 18-year-olds, 100 years ago were married.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it's not just that. A lot of them had been working for several years.
Yeah.
So presumably they were getting paid, one would hope, which meant they had
with their wife.
They had the money, which meant that they could comply with the terms of the Militia Act. But this was Colorado's excuse. Another one, which was comical, was the excuse that, well, Governor Paulus wouldn't be enforcing the law himself. And the court
Wait a minute. No,
really.
That's not how that works.
True fact.
Okay.
They say that Paulus won't be actually out there going after 18-year-olds who got a gun.
So they're suing the wrong person.
Well, I don't know what that was.
He signed the law. He's responsible.
He signed the law. He's the chief executive of the state of Colorado. All of the agencies that do enforce the law
work
report
for
to
him.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the rest of the defense wasn't any better. In fact, some of it wasn't even that good.
It sounds like it was judicial comedy, if you will, if there is such a thing. So,
I couldn't believe it when I read Judge Brimmer's ruling. I just couldn't believe that attorneys on their own would come up with some of this stuff.
Well,
I mean, they're assuming that the judge, who is the chief judge of the entire district, and he's been on the bench for years, won't see right through that. I'm wondering how many times during the oral arguments was he banging his head on his bench? Yeah. What is it?
Pound, instead of hashtag, we used to say, way back in the beginning, we used to say pound, and it would be pound head desk. Now it's pound judicial head desk. So, it kind of makes me wonder if they and we saw this over Obamacare, where they just threw in an argument just to throw it in on a wing and a prayer, and it turned out to be the only reason that Obamacare was allowed to be enacted. But it was literally, we heard over and over again, and I remember so clearly watching them read the verdict from SCOTUS on Obamacare from the steps, and they rejected all the arguments. And the girl, because I was watching Fox, and the girl was getting really excited, and then she got to the last thing, and she's like, wait, what? She literally say that. But they had thrown in that Obamacare was a tax, and of course the federal government has the right to tax citizens. Therefore, he could do it. And I'm wondering if it wasn't that same sort of, let's just throw this in and, we don't expect it to fly, but we'll give it a shot anyway. And I mean, okay, it's a strategy. I don't think it's a good one, but
apparently in this case it wasn't.
Strategy.
Yeah, kind of got screwed up.
Yeah.
But no, it really, that was a breath of fresh air, because this Colorado has just gone nuts, really. And the thing is about that, they've passed all these gun laws since 2014, when they enacted universal background checks. And the only thing that has happened in that state is that their homicide rate has skyrocketed by double digits. I mean, I looked at by 2021, the rate had increased like 33%. Yeah. I mean, you talk about, wow.
Yeah.
You know, hey, time to wake up and smell the coffee, folks. It ain't working.
Well, Colorado's always had some very interesting laws anyway on the book. So I don't know if it's the snow. I don't know what it is, but yeah, they're right up there with California with their, you're gonna do what now?
Yeah.
You know? So okay. So the other thing that you wanted to talk about that is on my agenda is the Jason Aldean song, which I hadn't heard before you called, but I knew about, and all the criticism and this and that and the other thing. And I've watched the video, I've read the lyrics. The whole big shenanigans thing was it's racist. I can't find anything in there that's racist, and I don't say that as a privileged white woman. My husband is a man of color, so I tend to look through things with a little bit different lens than the average redhead. So, and then what I found out was, they're upset because he filmed part of it in front of the courthouse in his hometown, which, I don't know, had some Civil War meaning, whatever. And you know what? Okay, then shut down Fort Sumter, shut down every courthouse in the South ever. And I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Tear down these buildings because they existed during the Civil War? But I got to tell you, having listened to, the song, he ain't wrong. I've lived in small towns for most of my adult life. Everybody knows everyone, and they are all up in your business. But when you need help, those same people are right there. When my dad had major surgery and I was working an hour and a half away, so I couldn't commute to his house, they all, and this is a small town, just like Jason Aldean is describing, they all got a schedule together. Somebody came over for breakfast and visited on Monday. Somebody came at lunch. Somebody came at dinner. Tuesday, there were other people. And this is what people do. This is small town living. So, he ain't wrong. You don't see or hear about rioting and looting in small towns because everybody's in your business. And that dog ain't gonna hunt.
Yeah.
We take care of our own. And we have the police, the local police, to help us. There are few real secrets in small towns. Yes, somebody's going to say, but there was this. Yes, there's always exceptions to every single rule ever. But generally speaking, there's no real big secrets in a small town. You want to go on a looting spree? Good luck. The neighbors who see you will call the police, identify you, and they're going to show up in court to testify. No matter what your reason for doing such a thing, you are not going to get away with it. Shenanigans, sicknesses, joys, and celebrations, they're all a shared experience in a small town. And I love this song. I've read the lyrics, I've listened to the song, I've watched the video. And, this is just another one of those. If you tilt your head and you squint real hard and you play the record backwards, it's one of those kind of things. And it's just ridiculous. And you brought to my attention that the founder, whose name I refuse to speak, of Moms Demand Action takes credit for CMT pulling the video from its channel. Here's what I want, and literally, she's taking credit. Nobody's giving it to her. She's taking credit. And so I just want to know, Bill, does that mean that I get to take credit for the plot line of killing JR back in the 80s?
Works for me.
I mean, it's the same logic, right?
Yeah.
I can say anything I want, but then I make it so. And hey, thanks, moms, as long as y'all are taking credit for making that song number one. Aldean is laughing at you all the way to the bank. And I know you have your thoughts on this too, but I just wanted to.
Well, to make a mountain out of a molehill, you have to start with a molehill. Unless you're the woman that you won't mention.
Who shall not be named.
Yes, yes. The loose cannon among the gun control crowd.
Yeah.
But no, she raised a big stink about it, saying that it promoted violence and racism. And you know, as you said, you read the lyrics and you go, okay, where? The building, okay, this actually, Aldean's from Macon, Georgia. Where they filmed the video was in front of the Maury County Courthouse in Tennessee. Now, that's in Columbia, Tennessee, and just a little bit southwest of Nashville, so it's close by. Now, the Maury County Courthouse was a site of lynching nearly 100 years ago. It was a site of some racial unrest and a little bit of violence, nearly 80 years ago. Other than that, not a thing. It's a really beautiful building, and it's in Columbia, Tennessee, which is the county seat. Now, Columbia, Tennessee is a town of less than 42,000 people. It's not a big city.
Right.
I mean, it's not a little tiny town, but
Right.
it's just a small town.
Right.
And you're right. What he's talking about are the strengths and the benefits of a small town. And he's the violence that's seen in there, is some of it was from the civil unrest in 2020, and some of it was just like store footage of a guy with a gun jumping over a counter to rob a liquor store, or to carjack a woman's car, or do assault her. So he's saying, that wouldn't fly here. No.
And he didn't advocate violence. He showed violence from large cities. And he's like, no, this doesn't happen in small towns because ain't nobody going to tolerate it. And we don't care. And I don't want anybody to misunderstand either Bill or I. Let me be extraordinarily clear. The racism that has happened over the course of our country is a tragedy. Nobody should be judged on anything other than the content of their character, what comes out of your mouth and your actions. But I don't think we go and destroy every courthouse south of the Mason-Dixon line because bad things happened behind that building, at one time. Terrible time. It's a building. That's it. So,
let's go back. Let's take the same line of reasoning to Salem, Massachusetts. I seem to recall something about a witch hunt and some really brutal punishments and killings of women who were just accused of being witches, even though, they weren't. But the thing is that if you look here, okay, Aldean's not promoting violence. He's saying the kind of violence that we're seeing in the big cities, as a matter of fact, the kind of violence that's permitted in big cities would be tolerated.
Mayor of Baltimore, I want to give them room to, what did she say, Bill? I can't believe I can't remember this. I want to give them room to destroy, or something along those lines. And I went, what? Now, she's no longer the mayor of Baltimore, but what? We had massive riots going on in Baltimore, and she wants to give them room to destroy?
Well, it's like the mayor of Seattle or the mayor of Portland, Oregon. I mean, the mayor of Portland, Oregon was out there with the crowd. I mean, he was out there when they were, trying to storm the federal building in Portland. And no, that, we don't do that.
Yeah, the mayor should not be breaking the law.
No.
Like, you can express your opinion fully without breaking the law. I mean, we saw sit-ins in the 60s. Those were highly effective. We saw the March on Washington. Very peaceful, made huge strides towards, better equality in this country. I liked his song, and I'd like to thank Moms Demand Action for sending him to number one.
Yeah, where he richly deserves to be.
Absolutely, because
And there's also already a call for a boycott of country music television for being spineless. The other thing that they go on, and this was not just She Who Shall Remain Nameless, but music critic for Slate called Aldean's song an anthem about taking up arms against a perceived woke mob.
Which is not at all what he was saying. He was saying, if you want to, loot or burn things in a small town, people are not going to have the patience for it as they do in urban areas. The police will be called. You will be dealt with in an appropriate manner. He was just like, they ain't gonna take it. Nobody's gonna take it. Nobody's gonna put up. And I've lived in small towns where literally 6,000 people. Now, I know there are smaller towns in Texas, so pardon me, but that's a very small town. Literally, I ran for town council and knocked on every single door. So if I can knock on every single door for a town council race, I got to tell you, that's a small freaking town.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't done in a day, but none of these, and I've lived in a couple small towns, some bigger than that, some smaller than that. My dad lived in one that was technically smaller, but, well, anyway.
My dad was born in basically a tiny town in northeast Texas, Roxton. It's a suburb of Paris, which ain't no big town itself.
Yeah, but we want to go so we can see the Eiffel Tower.
No, they don't even have a replica of it there.
Oh, I thought they did. I thought there was a replica of the Eiffel Tower in Texas. I assumed it was in Paris.
Well, if it did, it's been years since I've actually been up there, so they may have just for the heck of it. I do remember that the movie about Paris, Texas was not anywhere close to Paris, Texas. And somebody got upset with me. I said, my uncle was the mayor of Paris, Texas. I know what Paris, Texas is like.
Right.
So, but the other thing is that, there's a line in the song about, I inherited a gun from my grandfather. Mm-hmm. And, they want to come take it away. And basically, that's really pretty much true. We've seen basically this from the gun control gang. They do want to take them away. That's their whole deal.
Yeah.
And the thing is that Aldean is saying, we're not going to comply with your ban. We're not going to peacefully allow you to just come take our weapons.
Well, and I'm not sure he's saying we won't peacefully, but I didn't get that, neither from the video nor the lyrics. But I will say he is saying they are not going to be happy about it, and there will be pushback. Now, I don't think he's saying. I don't think he's saying, we're going to shoot at you if you come take our. I don't think that's at all what he was saying.
No,
but I think
he's saying. But the thing is that what he's saying is they're not going to comply. And this, if anybody other than the gun control gang had ever looked at any of the stats on efforts to establish registries or, when the ATF said that pistols with stabilizing braces were now an NFA short barrel rifle. Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, you have by this date to comply. You can apply to have it registered as a short barrel rifle. About 8%, maybe, of the estimated number of rifles in the circulation registered, which means 92% didn't. When New York State in 2013 tried to require people, this is New York State, tried to require people who owned certain types of firearms to register them with the New York State Police. Mm-hmm. By 2014.
Bueno. No bueno. Yeah.
Yeah, no bueno. The thing is that it took a court order to force the New York State Police to release compliance statistics. Because, now, they estimated the number of those guns between 250,000 and a million. A total of 44,000 were registered. And this is in New York State, which is legendary for gun control laws.
Mm-hmm. Maryland, California, all the
Oh,
same.
yeah. So it's not just Jason Aldean saying, we're not going to comply. He's got a lot of history to back him up.
And he didn't say we're not going to comply. He just basically what he said was that dog ain't going to hunt.
Yeah, pretty much.
So yeah, I want to keep this in perspective because I don't want anybody coming away from your broadcast saying, "Oh, they said no. Go read the lyrics for yourself. We play the song for you, but the man's still making money off it, so we can't play it for you. But go look up the lyrics, and I'm sure that your producer may even put like a link to the lyrics or the song itself in your show notes. But anyway, Bill, I want to thank you so much for having me on this show. I really appreciate it. This
always
is always
glad to have you.
Always a good time. And when you see your producer, thank him as well for all his hard work. He is a valued member of the team, and I hope to do this again.
Oh yeah, I gotta do it. Absolutely. Anyway, I guess what we need to do now is turn everything back over to our host, Will Cawthon, who's also the producer. So over to you, Will.
Turning now to today's question. Why don't you leave the policing to the police rather than buying guns? The question raises an issue that is a real point of contention between the gun control gang and those who own guns for self-defense. Gun control advocates say defensive firearms are unnecessary because the police are armed and trained in the use of force. Gun owners and gun rights activists say a firearm in the home or carried is the best defense against an attacker or home invader because it's there when you need it. Bill Cawthon takes a look at the issue.
Gun owners are perfectly willing to leave policing to the police. But it's important to understand what policing is, what the police are required to do, and what they're not required to do. Law enforcement covers several functions: enforcing the statutes and regulations enacted and imposed by the government, investigating violations of those laws, arresting offenders, and maintaining or restoring public order. Some agencies, such as sheriff's offices, have other jobs, such as operating county jails and serving civil court papers. What law enforcement cannot do, and is not legally obligated to do, is to reliably protect individuals from harm. So, as an individual, protecting my family and myself from attacks or other violence before there is physical harm is up to me.
Wait a minute. I thought the main job of the police was to protect people. In fact, that's one of the big arguments used by gun control advocates. We have the police, so there is no need to own a gun for self-defense.
The main job of law enforcement is to protect the people, but that's people as in a community, not as individuals. In 1981, a case called Warren versus District of Columbia was heard in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. A group of 3 women sued the Washington Metropolitan Police and some individual officers for failing to provide police services, which resulted in all 3 women being repeatedly assaulted. A 4th individual, a man who had been beaten, joined the lawsuit. An en banc review, including all federal judges in the D.C. Circuit, held that the police do not have a duty to provide services to specific individuals. In 2005, the Supreme Court heard City of Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, involving Jessica Gonzalez, a woman who had a permanent restraining order against her ex-husband, and the town of Castle Rock, Colorado. When her ex took their 3 daughters in violation of the order, she called police repeatedly and asked them to reinforce the order. Officers took no action, but the ex-husband later showed up at the police station and was killed in an exchange of gunfire. Afterwards, investigators recovered the bodies of the 3 little girls from his truck. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court. In a 7-2 decision, the court ruled the police were not obligated to enforce the restraining order. Aside from court decisions, this is also a practical matter. How long does a typical assault or robbery take? Some home invasions are over in as little as 90 seconds. About 70% of mass shootings take place in less than 5 minutes, and about a third are over in less than 2. And what is the police response time in your area? Let's be generous and say your top priority call is answered quickly, the operator is efficient and sends out the call. There is an available officer in the area who's not engaged in something like a traffic stop. Weather's good, traffic's light, emergency equipment is in use, and the officer is familiar with the area. In addition, you have remained on the phone with the dispatcher, and the responding officer has a reasonable idea of what's happened and where the offenders are located. According to data reported by various agencies, from the time your call is answered until an officer is on scene is about 5 minutes, under ideal conditions. In the real world, conditions are seldom that favorable. Now, let's be honest, conditions are almost never that favorable. Accurate nationwide data is hard to find. The last time the U.S. Department of Justice investigated response times was back in 2008. With the continuing shakeout from COVID-19 and the violence in 2020, along with unforgivably short-sighted politicians who demonized, downsized, and defunded police, the situation has gotten worse. Thousands of officers are quitting or retiring, and agencies are having a hard time replacing them. This means fewer officers on the street, and only idiots and those politicians would have been surprised at the results. In New Orleans, for example, a murderer or robber could commit their crime and be across the state line into Mississippi before the New Orleans police arrive. Chicago says officers arrive within 9.5 minutes, but manpower shortages mean that even priority 1 calls get backed up because there aren't any available officers. New York City is fairly open about response times and says critical 0 calls take about 7 minutes and 20 seconds. Looking closer to home, Texas's big cities average about 7 minutes and 42 seconds. Dallas currently has the worst time at about 10 minutes, with Fort Worth slightly behind just under 9 minutes. Austin and Houston are both around 8 minutes, and Lubbock is under 6. Beaumont has the lowest from all big cities in Texas, claiming a typical response time of less than 5 minutes. I wasn't able to find a post-COVID time for San Antonio. While all of the cities are trying to improve, we have to deal with current reality, which is that the police are very unlikely to arrive in time to keep you and your loved ones from harm. So you're asking why we should buy guns, keep guns, and carry guns? The American people have already figured that out. Tens of millions of Americans have a gun for self-defense or for home defense. It's a big reason in 2020, after the pandemic upended Americans' lives, followed by widespread civil disorder, U.S. firearms sales soared by 69% compared to 2019. Handgun sales rose by more than 80%. It's estimated that about 8 million people became first-time gun owners. Stories of Americans acting as their own first responders are in the local news almost every day. And it's not just break-ins and assaults. In 2019, Jack Wilson ended a mass shooting at the West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement, Texas, in just 6 seconds. Last year, Elisha Dicken ended a mass shooting at Greenwood Park Mall in Greenwood, Indiana, in less than a minute. Yes, a total of 5 innocent lives were lost, but there's no doubt that many more were saved. After the incident in White Settlement, Michael Bloomberg, who was running for the Democratic nomination for president, said perhaps one of the stupidest things I have ever heard come out of a politician's mouth. Bloomberg said they should have waited for police and that you didn't want people with guns in church. And he said it with a straight face. Following the Greenwood Park Mall incident, while law enforcement and the governor were calling Dicken a hero, commentators on a popular network morning show were upset that Dicken had violated a mall policy. They couldn't even get that right. They said he broke the law, which was untrue. This kind of thinking is the product of an unwell mind. It may be unintentional, it may even be unconscious. But these people are saying they're willing to accept the deaths of innocent people if it will advance gun control. Based on a sentiment survey of 54,000 American adults, William English, a professor at Georgetown University estimated that guns are used defensively about 1.7 million times a year. Other estimates from the CDC, the FBI, and others have placed the number at anywhere from 500,000 to about 2.5 million. Think of it this way. At a minimum, that's 500,000 or more times the police weren't there. 500,000 examples of gun owners' assertions that a citizen must often be their own first responder. We're perfectly willing to leave the policing to the police. We have guns so that we can be there when the police arrive.
So, there you have it. Hopefully, you can make a more informed decision about whether a defensive firearm is right for you. The Second Amendment Society of Texas believes that gun ownership is a personal decision. You, along with a partner, spouse, or significant other, are the only ones that can make that choice. What we do believe is that, as a right, there is no reason for all the obstacles governments, especially state governments, enact to prevent you from exercising your right. That's it for this time. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with more answers. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the like and subscribe buttons and make sure to hit that notification bell to be notified whenever we upload a new video. Be sure to visit 2ASociety.org and become a paid subscriber. Paid subscribers not only get email updates, they get to ask questions. While you're there, visit the shop. We've got stuff sure to upset the gun control gang, and best of all, it's all true.